Mahata of the Mahatattva. To but Vikurvanat, being transformed. Raja, the material mode of passion. Sattva, the mode of goodness. Upabrimhitat, because of being increased. Tama, the mode of darkness. Pradhana, being prominent. To but abhavat, took place. Dravya, matter. Jnana, material knowledge. Kriya atmaka, predominantly material activities. Translation. Material activities are caused by the Mahatattvas being agitated. At first, there is transformation of the modes of goodness and passion, and later, due to the mode of ignorance, matter, its knowledge, and different activities of material knowledge come into play. Purport. Material creations of every description are more or less due to the development of the mode of passion, rajas. The Mahatattva is the principle of material creation, and when it is agitated by the will of the Supreme, at first the modes of passion and goodness are prominent, and afterwards the mode of passion being generated in due course by material activities of different varieties becomes prominent. And the living entities are thus involved more and more in ignorance. Brahma is the representation of the mode of passion, and Vishnu is the representation of the mode of goodness, while the mode of ignorance is represented by Lord Shiva, the father of material activities. Material nature is called the mother, and the initiator for materialistic life is the father, Lord Shiva. All material creation by the living entities is therefore initiated by the mode of passion. With the advancement of the duration of life in a particular millennium, the different modes act by gradual development. In the age of Kali, when the mode of passion is most prominent, material activities of different varieties in the name of advancement of human civilization take place, and the living entities become more and more involved in forgetting their real identity, the spiritual nature. By a slight cultivation of the mode of goodness, a glimpse of spiritual nature is perceived, but due to the prominence of the mode of passion, the mode of goodness becomes adulterated. Therefore, one cannot transcend the limits of the material modes, and therefore realization of the Lord, who is always transcendental to the modes of material nature, modes of nature becomes very difficult for the living entities, even though prominently situated in the mode of goodness through cultivation of the various methods. In other words, the gross matters are adibhutam, their maintenance is adidaivam, and the initiator of material activities is called adhyatmam. In the material world, these three principles act as prominent features, namely as raw material, its irregular supplies, and its use in different varieties of material creations for sense enjoyment by the bewildered entities. Mahatastu vikurbana raja sattvo pabrimhita tama pradhanas vabhava dravya gana kriyatmaka. Material activities are caused by the Mahatattvas being agitated. At first there is transformation of the modes of goodness and passion, and later due to the mode of ignorance, matter, its knowledge, and different activities of material knowledge come into play. So continuing on, in the previous verse it was mentioned how there is the different Vishnus, the Maha Vishnu and the Garbhodakshay Vishnu and the different Chiradakshay Vishnu and so on, was also previously mentioned. And of course from the in the corner of the spiritual world, I think Vasishrestha was explaining this, there is the Mahatattva cloud in the spiritual world is formed, and that is the Mahatattva. So all these different terms, it's a little technical. Mahatattva is the sum total of the material elements there for the living entities who want to be separate from Krishna. They can have a place over there. And so that is the Mahatattva. And of course the Lord lies down in that, and so many universes are generated, and within each universe, first of all, there is an unmanifested stage of the material elements that's called pradhana. So we have the Mahatattva, the gross aggregate of the material elements are there, and which is almost like a spiritual situation. It's an energy coming from the Supreme Lord. It's not yet manifested into so many different things, and we then have pradhana. In each universe we have all the pradhana and the unmanifested material elements and qualities. And then we have, when that becomes agitated due to kala, time, then what develops is what's called prakriti. Prakriti is the manifested stage of all these things that previously were unmanifested. So here is mentioned about kala, and kala, time. And kalosmi lokachitraya pravrito, I am time. Actually it is mentioned that time is an aspect of the Chiradakshaya Vishnu, Paramatma. By the movement of Paramatma, he arranges all these different movements of atoms, and it is said that that cause, that is kala. So kala is that all these elements are agitated by time, and everything is put into motion. So time initiates the creation, and time goes along, and it's maintained, and then in the end time brings everything to an end again. So that time is supreme, and we don't have any control over time. We can't go back in time, although people sometimes talk about or dream about go back in time. Maybe we can get a time machine and go back, but actually that's not possible. I always remember the incident before the start of the Kurukshetra war. There was a meeting in Dwarka, and all the leaders were there and King Ugrasena was there, and there was a big discussion, and how to avert it. All these different points were brought up. So someone was saying, if only things could be like they were before, everyone was more friendly with each other, and we could go back in time, maybe we could have that again, we could take it back to that. And Lord Balaram, I always remember, the Lord Balaram actually, he got up and he spoke, and he said that no one can ever go back in time. You cannot, because things change in time. It said that you change, they change, the place change, everything changes. So sometimes we think like that, we want to go back, and I remember, I think I've told this story before. One devotee told me that they had been a devotee for some time, then they decided to go away from being a devotee, and after many years, after decades, and they thought, well, I'm going to look up all my old friends, and haven't really kept in contact, so we're going to go back and look and we'll find out where they are, then going to go see them. So he kind of remembered where one friend was, but then when he went there, that was a car park now. Even the house didn't exist anymore. So he didn't know where the friend was, he didn't know where the house was. That was the old house, we always used to hang out over there, it's a car park. Then he found out some other friend, and he kind of a bit excited, he knocked on the door, and this was 20 years later, and he said, they opened the door and said, "Oh, Jack, I haven't seen you for a long time. What are you doing here?" It was like kind of cold. "What are you doing here?" I talked to him, had a short conversation, and then that old friend wound it up pretty quick. I got the family and all that. See you later, type of thing. So everything had changed. So nothing can be the same. Everything moves on, and so we kind of like. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says that people are like they never live in the present actually. They kind of think about the past. Oh, remember when we did that? Remember when we did this? That was a good time. They think about those things, and then they think, next week we're going to do this, and next month, and then they think about that. But as far as present, so they kind of act in the present, but they're thinking of the past and they're thinking of the future. So in that sense, he says, people never live in the present. They're always kind of caught. It's kind of like a twilight world or something like that. So time is supreme, and it just marches on. So we have to adjust to the situation. Everything's changing as far as in the material world. Of course, spiritually speaking, we're always the same. That remains constant. But unfortunately, when the living entity comes to this world, the living entity, this prakriti, this energy, is very powerful. Originally coming from the Supreme Lord, manifested as Parashakti, as Mahamaya in the form of Durga or Parvati, and it's very powerful. So the tiny living entity, although spiritual is tiny, becomes conditioned by this energy and becomes covered over. And this is technically called Avrinatmika. There's two aspects of the material energy. One's called Avrinatmika, and Avrinatmika means covering, just covering, conditioned, covered. This is where the modes come in, the modes of, especially in Kali Yuga, passion and ignorance. Just covered over. We become covered over, we become forgetful of our actual situation, we become overwhelmed, we become Avrinatmika. And Prabhupada actually, in one purport, he talks about Avrinatmika, and he talks also about Prakshipatmika, which means pulling in. The material energy that she's got one force that pulls in the living entities. One gets pulled in and gets covered. And as you go down the lower species of life, the consciousness is so covered that one doesn't know if they're enjoying or suffering. They're just existing. They don't know if it's happiness they're feeling or if it's suffering they're feeling. They're so covered over by their situation. And Prabhupada gives the example of the hog. The hog goes along and it pretty much eats anything. It'll eat stool. And so, but to us looking at the pig eating the stool, we're disgusted. Well, look at that pig eating the stool. And they differentiate. But Prabhupada one time I was giving the story, said that, and when the living entity is taken for preparing for the next body, sometimes they're given stool, and they're given all different grades of stool. And when they like the fresh stool, now you're ready. So we see, especially when we go to Vrindavan, we see all the hogs there. They like the stool. Sometimes you see, I saw a little boy passing stool in the field, and right nearby there was a hog just waiting until he was finished. Practically, he almost nudged him aside. So they can't wait. So this is the pig, but we're looking at it and we're disgusted. But we're in the higher grade of life. Our consciousness is more developed. The Prabhupada said those species where the consciousness is less developed, they can't discern whether this is eating stool is, to them it's happiness, but they don't really know. They're just impelled by their urges, being impelled especially by the mode of ignorance. And so here is mention about the different millenniums. Now we're in the Kali Yuga. Before was the Satya Yuga and the Treta Yuga, and where more in the Satya Yuga was more mode of goodness. Goodness was prominent, and in the Treta was a little bit of a mix of passion and good. And then Dwapara, some ignorance came in, and Kali Yuga is really kind of passion and ignorance. They're the prominent modes. So these forces of the material, and they're very powerful. Prakriti manifesting through the modes, affecting all of us in so many ways, and very, very powerful. And there's no way to overcome it. There's no way. Here it is mentioned by Prabhupada in his purport that this Avrinatmika, this Prakshipatna, these aspects of material energy are so powerful, covering. Sometimes one can sometimes rise up to the mode of goodness, but then the modes act so strongly that one gets pulled back again. One gets pulled back. You come up, and even Prabhupada mentioned, sometimes one gets a glimpse of spirituality, because mode of goodness means a more kind of peaceful situation, more steady. These are some of the symptoms of the mode of goodness. One's more peaceful, one's more steady. In that peaceful state, the mind is clear, the intelligence is sharper, and then one may come across the spiritual life. But due to being in the Kali Yuga, and due to the mode of passion and ignorance being very strong, that like window, you could almost say it's like a window of opportunity, closes up again. You get pulled in. It's like you come up for a breath, just like if someone's swimming in a powerful surf, and you're getting tossed around, you're under. But then you come up, you get a, but then all of a sudden you get pulled back down again. This is what's like living, especially in Kali Yuga. You get pulled back in, and you get swirled around, dumped down, and plus you have to fend off all the sharks and stuff like that. Okay. So people go along, and they're living in the world, and even they're very much affected, passion, ignorance, very stressful situations, being pushed along, and to them there's one description that the spiritual life, it's described, it's so rare for most people in Kali Yuga that it's described as a spot on the horizon. Just like if you're looking out on the horizon, you're looking out, it's very vast, and you may see a spot somewhere. There's a spot over there. So spiritual life is described like that for people in the Kali Yuga especially. That there's a spot all of a sudden over there, but because it's so, you kind of move off it pretty quick, and then if it's a spot you've lost, next time you look for it, it's gone. So small, so insignificant. So that's what it's like. It's very, very rare for spiritual life. This is all due to all these, Prakriti and the modes of nature, and being Avrinatmika, covered and pulled down. Pulled down means you go lower and lower. By your activity, your activities become grosser and grosser. And because you're engaged in grosser activity, then you take grosser and grosser bodies. Here it is also mentioned about the Adibhutam, and the Adi Daivam, and Adi Yatman. This is specifically refers to the Adibhutam, just the material elements, material ingredients. And very interestingly, in the first chapter first verse of Bhagavad Gita, text 1, these questions are. Now there's one story that I want to tell in this regard, to this this famous verse from Bhagavad Gita. Once there was a Brahmana, his name was Bhavashama, but he was not really acting like a Brahmana. He was very kind of sinful, very addicted to meat eating, gambling, and drank a lot of alcohol. He was married to a prostitute, but he used to see so many other women simultaneously. And so one time he went to a gathering, and he was drinking so much alcohol that he just went into a stupor, and all the alcohol was coming out of his mouth, out of his nose, and he was just like lying down like paralytic or something like that. Right? So that's quite common in the Kali Yuga, isn't it? That's what they had a good time. This was a good time. Anyway, he was like that, and so he contracted really severe dysentery, chronic dysentery, and he got sicker and sicker. He died. And he came back as a date palm tree. Now, the wine he was really attracted to drinking a lot of was date palm wine. So he came back as a date palm tree. And he was there for a long time as a date palm tree. But it just so happened that two Brahma Rakshasas had taken shelter under this date palm tree. But they had a bit of a history too. It was husband and wife. And they were formerly Brahmins, but they were very kind of sinful, both husbands. They were very greedy, engaged in all sorts of illicit activities, and so on and so forth. They got their reaction. They had to become Brahma Rakshasas in their next life, Bhutas. So they parked themselves under the date palm tree, which was now Bhavasham had become. So the wife was there and she was talking, they were talking, and so she was saying to the husband, how long do we have to stay in these Brahma Rakshasa bodies, these Bhuta ghost bodies, how long? How do we get out of it? She was saying, how do we get out of it? And the husband said, well, we have to cultivate knowledge of Brahman. And we have to cultivate knowledge of the self, the Atma. And we have to cultivate knowledge of the karma, the activities and all the actions and reactions. We have to know all these things. And she said, well, what is Brahman? And what is the self? And what are all these activities? So when she said that accidentally, she recited the first half of the first verse of the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Kim Brahma Kim Yat Mam Kim Tat Brahma Kim Yat Mam Kim Kama Purushatama Adi Bhutam Cha Kim Proktam Adi Daivam Kim Uchate. It's mentioned in this verse about Adi Bhutam and Adi Daivam, Adi Atmam. So when she asked the question, well, what is this Brahman? What is it? She accidentally recited the first half of the shloka. So, just at that time, when she did that, all of a sudden they heard a noise in the tree, and the tree just fell apart. And there was Bhavashama again, but this time in a sinless Brahmana body, just free from all sins. Just by hearing that verse, half the verse, he was freed from the date palm tree body, and he regained his Brahmana form. And as he watched, he saw that a Vaikuntha Vimana came for the couple who were Brahmana Rakshasas, and they mounted it and they went back to Godhead. Now, Bhavashama, he was so astonished, he decided to go to Varanasi. And he sat by the Ganges at Varanasi and he practiced tapasya, and he continuously recited this half a shloka from Bhagavad Gita, continuously. And so, this time, in Vaikuntha, the Lord Vishnu was there, lying down, and Lakshmi was there, but he all of a sudden got up. And Lakshmi said that, why have you all of a sudden got up, my Lord? And he said that, well, I've been observing the activities of one Brahmana by the bank of the Ganga at Kashi. And he's been practicing tapasya for a long time, and every day, all day long practically, he recites this Bhagavad Gita from the shloka from the Bhagavad Gita. So I've been thinking how to reward him. And so this story was told by Lord Shiva to Parvati. And so Parvati said, so what did Lord Vishnu do? And Lord Shiva said, well, he sent a Vaikuntha Vimana for that particular Brahmana, and he went back home, back to Godhead. And the Lord was so pleased with him that all his ancestors were also freed. They also were liberated because of his pious activities and his spiritual activities. So this is, now here it is said, Kim tad Brahma kim atyatma, and then Adi Bhutam cha kim proktam Adi Daivam kim uchate. This is what is Brahman? What is the self? What is the karma? These are very important questions to ask. And unless one comes to this level, but it's very difficult to come to that level. Who even knows to ask these questions? As I said, in Kali Yuga, now we're all under the Parashakti. We're all under. Here it is said that the mother of the mother is considered Parashakti, is considered Parvati. She is the mother. She is the mother of the. She's providing the facility, just like mothers provide the body of one who becomes the son or the daughter of the mother. Right. So the Parvati is considered the mother, and Lord Shiva is considered the father, because he is in charge of the mode of ignorance. He is, of course, the husband of Parvati, and so she is the mother. So he is the father, and he's considered the father in many different ways. One is considered he protected the living entities when that poison came out of the churning of the ocean of milk. He saved, so the father protects everyone, so he's considered the father in that way. He's considered the father because although there's different modes of nature, there's goodness, passion, and ignorance, in reality the whole material universe, to anyone living here forgetful of Krishna, is in ignorance. So in that sense he's also because he's in charge of that. So in that sense he's the father. What is, you can get subjective, about what is good and what is bad, and it's relative, because what is good for some is not good for others, what is bad for some is not bad for others. It's kind of relative. But in the totality of material existence, forgetful of Krishna is actually mode of ignorance. I always tell the story of Prabhupada when the man came to see him, asked him to read his palm, and Prabhupada said, "No, we don't do these things. We don't read the palms." So no, Swami, please read my palm. No, all right, give it. He gave him again. All bad. Because of good, bad, this is. We see in relativity, and people under the mode of passion and ignorance especially, it's all relative. So what is good, this is good. But actually, the whole situation is ignorance, the whole situation. So therefore, Lord Shiva is considered the father in that way, because he's looking after that mode in which the living entities are, he is the provider in that sense. And of course, Parvati, she is providing all the raw and the whole situation. So the mother and the father, here is mentioned, the Lord Shiva, Parvati, they're the mother and father in that sense. Nature, so the transformation and involvement and the reactions come and go. We know this. They're wound up again. Time is agitating everything. That is Krishna. So the first cause is Kala, is time. All these are due, of course, to the Supreme Lord. So this is the point that is made, the cause of all causes. The point of this chapter is that, all right, all these things are interacting, but beyond all that, the supreme cause is the personality of God. So this is the theme of this chapter, and this is now explained as we go along. We'll read more of it. This verse again: material activities are caused by the Mahatattvas being agitated. First there is transformation of the modes of goodness and passion, and later, due to the mode of ignorance, matter, its knowledge, and different activities of material knowledge come into play. Does anyone have any question or comment? Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj, for taking my class. I was just wondering, you spoke about how these Brahma Bhutas, they were liberated so easily, it seems, just by chanting half a Bhagavad.
Sorry, say again. You're booming there with it. Can we take the boom off that? Take the bass off. Yeah, if you hold it closer. Yeah.
So you were speaking about how those Brahma Bhutas, they were liberated what seemed in such an easy way. They just chanted this Bhagavad Gita, or half the Bhagavad Gita mantra. They're going to Vaikuntha. And I was thinking, because in one sense we see, in places like Nectar of Devotion or 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, all these things Krishna is telling us, what will make him happy, or these rules in devotional service, or things we're meant to do to get to that platform where we can finally come dear to him, or finally go back to the spiritual world. And then, we also see cases like this, or with Lord Chaitanya, he's liberated people so easily, giving out mercy so easily. So I'm wondering, what's that correct mood we're meant to have in regards to the hope of going back to Godhead in one lifetime, with the idea that is it something that's kind of, maybe we can consider very achievable, or that we go actually very, very far away?
We can what?
Or thinking it's very far away, such a goal to be.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, these stories are like special mercy. We don't know all the intricacies of those individuals, of their previous situation, and thereby they've come to this. That story is told in the Gita Mahatmya, but generally the case is that they've had a few lives and they've got to this situation, and to show them mercy, that generally is their position with these types of stories. Or it's causeless. The Lord, from whatever position, just decides, even though someone is not worthy, he just decides he's going to take them back to God. But we shouldn't just be counting on that. In other words, I can do anything, and then I'll just pray to the Lord, and He'll just take me immediately back to God. Maybe, maybe not, and it's up to Him. And we shouldn't live our life anticipating that this is going to happen to us. We read these stories, this could happen to us, so let me just go out there and do anything I want, and at the end of the day, Krishna's going to take me back, just like I read from, these different stories. So therefore, Prabhupada always wanted us to know, you just follow, you please Krishna. See, the thing is that this Brahmana, Bhavashama, he pleased Lord Vishnu by his, the other two, they were taken back. They obviously had their history, but Bhavashama, he had to suffer as a date palm tree. But then he went to Kashi, went to Varanasi, and then he did a lot of tapasya. It doesn't mention how long he was doing that for. Could have been a long time. But anyway, at some point, Lord Vishnu was very pleased, and therefore, to reward his devotee, he liberated him immediately. Not only that, he liberated all his family members. So that's quite possible. So Prabhupada always said that, and this is Prahlad Maharaj also, many great acharyas say the same thing. Practice your whole life, because at any time something can happen, and if you're practiced, it just kicks in. It just kicks in. Krishna just kicks in. Just like sometimes you'll read, I read a little while ago that someone was having an episode at the beach or something like that, and epilepsy or something like that, and that someone had just happened to be there. They were like a paramedic, and they saw that, and it just they just kicked in. All their training just kicked in. It was like second nature. They just knew what to do. They saw that situation, and so because they were trained and they'd been living that life and trained, and they just knew, and it just kicked in and they just did it. They didn't have to think about it, they just did it. So Prabhupada wanted us to be like that. We just practice our Krishna consciousness, and then whatever happens, it just kicks in. And therefore we have to build up our inner devotion, our inner love. Don't be like a parrot, the parrots can sometimes, you can teach them to chant. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, they'll chant. We had that one in Christchurch, remember? We taught it to say Hari Bol and Hare Krishna and Jai Prabhupada and all these things. But Prabhupada said, yes, but if you go and try to strangle it, then it'll just go, won't do any Hare Krishnas anymore. So don't be like that. So, outside, presenting as devotee, but inside, another thing. So we have to be outside and inside. That's the Vaishnava. Outside and inside. Outside is not different to the inside, and inside is not different to the outside. Yes, did you?
You said, or the class was emphasising the mode of ignorance, which you consider the mode of ignorance is the prominent mode here. We're in the human form of life, so we've got a little bit of a dispensation of the whole material creation. We're a little bit gifted, we're not completely mode of ignorance, but the mode of ignorance is still prominent. We can't avoid, we can't consider that we're the best, we're the top ones.
Yeah. Is that a question or a comment?
Yeah.
Comment. Yes. There will always be, and this is Rajas Tamas Tamareti, this is mentioned in the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. There's always almost like a competition between the modes. Sometimes the ignorance will be prominent, other times there'll be passion will be prominent, and it switches around. It can be different times of day even, you're more in the mode of passion in the morning and the mode of ignorance in the evening. So it just switches around. But the thing is, that's what happens. It just keeps going round and round, and you never get out of it. And by yourself, it's virtually impossible. You need some mercy from the Supreme Personality of God to be able to get out. So that's why Lord Chaitanya, all the acharyas are so kind, because you just, avridatmika, pratchipatmika, just when you poke your head up, no, you're coming back in. I gave the example of the swimming in the surf. You get tumbled around, you're under, and you don't even know. Like if it's really wild, I remember one time I got tumbled around, and I was trying to get up to the top, and then I banged my head on the bottom. So I thought I was going up, but actually I was going down. Boom! Oh, that's the sand there. Have to go the other way. So you get so disorientated, and you don't know what's going on. And sometimes you think you know what's going on, but actually you don't. You're this little thing in this great huge ocean, tumbled around by this great huge surf. Yes. Who was next? Yes.
Maharaj, some mention. Some mention of Lord Shiva's wife there, so she's known as different names.
So what's by different names?
Lord Shiva's wife, Parvati. There's one purport in 10th canto, Prabhupada gives about 20 different names of Lord Shiva's wife. So are we talking about different moods or different activities of Parvati?
Yeah, some of them like that. Some of them are described Gauri and different things like that according to our activities. Others are different, just like Sati left her body and then they came back as Parvati. So some, but the answer would be both. It would be both by her activities and her, what she does, and that she's known by that name, and by different manifestations of her over the different millenniums. And she's known as Parvati, or she was known as Sati, and she's known as Durga. But that's more like the activity of Durga. Yeah. So there's so many different, like Lord Shiva himself, we're known by so many different names according to the different millennia and also the different types of activities.
It seems some persons are attracted to worshipping her in the mood of Kali, like very ghastly form. I guess that's very Tamagun type of attraction.
Yes, because you want her to fulfill very Tamagun type of your desires. So she comes in a form, and those who worship her like that, they're more in the mode mainly in the mode of ignorance and some passion, the ghastly form. And Lord Shiva is worshipped as the lingam, Shiva lingam, and Parvati's there also. There's a whole story about that in the Shiva Purana. I don't know if we've got time, I could tell that story of how the lingam, there's many different stories in this regard about the Shiva lingam, but there's one story from the Shiva Purana that states that where Lord Shiva came to a forest one time naked and covered in ash and in a different form. They knew he was Lord Shiva, but then the husbands, the brahmanas were there, but they were out collecting wood and the wives were there, so they were a bit taken back. Lord Shiva was naked, and so when the husbands came back, they were very angry that he was naked, so they cursed him to lose his manhood. And so it said that the lingam of Lord Shiva became fiery, dropped off and went fiery, went all over the universe. and burning everything to ashes. So everyone was in dismay, and then it went to Lord Brahma, and then, well, you think you could try to curse Lord Shiva, see what happened. So anyway, that happened, and so you have to pray to Parvati. Only she can appease Lord Shiva. And so ask her to manifest in the form of a yoni, with a uterus. And only then will the lingam has to be in one place, can't be burned in the whole universe. And the only one is Parvati. So that's how the Shiva lingam, that whole thing came about. The top half is Shiva, and the bottom receptacle, that's Parvati. So you've got Parashiva and you've got Parashakti in the form. So that's one form. There's so many different forms. That's a very popular form of worship of Lord Shiva, Shiva lingam. But other forms of Lord Shiva, other forms of Parvati. So many explanations can be there. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol.